trustees have had the memos given to them ahead of time and have a chance to review.
Second motion?
Any corrections, discussion? There's none, I'll take a roll call for.
Trustee Martin?
Aye.
Trustee Gillette?
Aye.
Trustee Zebrowski?
Aye.
Trustee Paul?
Aye.
Trustee Bell?
Aye.
Trustee Kevin?
Aye.
President Harden?
Aye, thank you. Item number 5, we're going to, public hearing, action item. Whenever it's, practical, we'll bring these up forward, so, open up a public hearing. We have 3 items tonight, take them individually and discuss. Item number 1, DOT 2061, recommended revision of the village wireless communication facility ordinance. Not a amendment.
That's not here.
It's basically, our attorney drafted up one of the other issues that,
Everybody received one.
Yeah, sorry, explain a little bit more, Sarah.
So our attorney, recommended the revisions based on other communities had this language, really, that it's the location that you're not. I'd just like to, point out one thing that was, brought up to us, tonight at the planning commission, was this is a good move, and what it is the, it was the, part of the program, in a court, decision that was made in Cedarburg. Basically what it is they cannot erect a cell tower in a area that is designated, to be a special, historical and select. So basically, that's a good move. Okay, so for us, the village center, the fact that we went through that designated, historic, that is a good thing. So that's why they can't put up a cell tower in the middle of, downtown Greenville. Does it help the rest of Greenville? No, it doesn't. That part is still at risk if you are against it. Okay, so that was the reason for this, and that's the verbiage that's being added.
Yes, one big thing, didn't they also say in planning commission that if it wasn't aesthetically pleasing, that would be grounds also for us to deny that permit, which was a huge win for us, you know? Yeah.
So this is a good thing.
All right. All right, there's, no more comments from the board. I will take, public comments. You can come up to the board or against what we're talking about. Please come up, give your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Alan Bingenheimer. I live at 6058 Oakwood Lane in Greendale. I'm a 1965 graduate of Greendale High School. I'm currently retired. I rise in opposition to the proposed addition of amendments of subsection 7 and 9 to the wireless communication facilities ordinance. On February 7th, 2017, I spoke here to support the installation of a cell tower at 50-person College. Ms. Ford voted in favor of a resolution to deny the installation, which nevertheless was reversed as it became apparent that it lacked the authority to deny the cell tower. Today, the tower is in service, providing benefit to local residents. I attempted to find out our cost to litigate the resolution, but have not yet received that information. But regardless, even though the words of the proposed resolution are lifted word for word from a town of Cedarburg ordinance that was litigated affirming this language, I contend that the wording is vague and eventually could be challenged at more cost to the taxpayers here in Greendale. In addition, adding more prohibitions can have unintended consequence of leaving our area as a technological backwater. Utility infrastructure, whether it be sewer, electric, water, gas, or communications in this case, benefits the community broadly and should be encouraged, not discouraged. It's necessary in the modern world. Who doesn't have a cell phone here? All right. The straw man, the straw woman argument that property values are diminished did not hold up. Single-family residences adjacent to the 51st and College installation, for example, Raven Drive, Oakton, in fact, saw increased valuations from 2017 to now. I don't think anybody here is going to vote to drop their assessment over in those areas. Anyway, I believe these added subsections as worded will only be used as a cudgel to legitimate improvements in our lifestyle by those who enjoy the benefits, but declare, not in my backyard. Thanks for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone, anything?
Elaine Unger, 4815 Sutton Lane, on behalf of Wisconsin for Safe Technology. I'm here today to show support for the addition to Greendale cell tower ordinance. Anything that the village can do to protect citizens' health, their property values, the aesthetics, especially downtown, from macro cell towers and small 5G cell towers in our village is a bonus. Thank you for all your actions that you've taken to protect Greendale residents from cell tower radiation. I want to share some good news with you about a lawsuit recently filed by Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense, which is led by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., against the FCC, related to wireless technology radiation health impacts and the 5G rollout. And I'm going to share some of their press release from July 30th. This is really good news. The case is challenging the FCC's refusal to review its 25-year-old obsolete wireless health guidelines and adopt rules that adequately protect public health. The most important evidence is human evidence, said the director of 5G and the Wireless Harms Project at Children's Health Defense. Those who have been injured and died because of the FCC's abuse of power have been invisible to the FCC, like the wireless radiation that harms them. The purpose of our case is to make this invisible problem visible. The brief shows clear evidence of harm, such as cancer, DNA damage, infertility, miscarriage, anxiety, depression, headaches, sleep disorders. You've heard me talk about all those health effects. From wireless radiation from sources such as cell phones, Wi-Fi, cell towers, utility smart meters on your home, at levels well below FCC emission limits. So the FCC allows radiation limits that protect us only from thermal harm, which means how hot the device can get to burn your skin. When was the last time your cell phone or cell tower burned your skin? So in America, the FCC is allowing this much radiation that we can be exposed to, and way down here is where the health effects are occurring. The false guidelines have enabled the uncontrolled proliferation of wireless technology, including 5G. The fast-track deployment of 5G will exponentially increase the forced exposure to this harmful radiation with, guess this, 800,000 more cell towers, 50 billion devices that will be wirelessly interconnected, and 1 million on-the-ground antennas to communicate with 50,000 5G low-orbit satellites. 400 of them have already been launched, thanks to Elon Musk. This is what the mainstream media should be talking about. But they don't want to lose the big telecom advertising dollars. No mask is going to protect us from this harm.
Thank you so much. Anyone else for that, please? Good evening.
Good evening. Julie Lewandowski, 5288 Wilson Lane. Along with Elaine, I would like to commend and support and thank the board for strengthening the telecommunications ordinance. And I would like to just quickly share something that my husband Bruce learned about recently. And by the way, probably everyone knows this, but we were very close to the tower at First in College.
And we do appreciate everything that goes to try to prevent it from being erected. We went door to door to hundreds of homes, talked to hundreds of people, and we only found one person who was concerned about a lack of cell coverage in his living room versus kitchen. One person. So anyway, Bruce and I had the privilege of visiting Hawaii in February, actually early March, the shutdown. And we recently found out that the county of Hawaii passed a resolution calling upon all telecommunications companies and public utilities operating in Hawaii County to cease the build-out of 5G wireless infrastructure until such technologies have been proven through independent research and testing to be safe to human health and environment. Hawaii is such a beautiful place. Greenville is a beautiful place, doesn't quite compare to Hawaii, but we're just glad for whatever you can do to keep us safe while balancing our need for technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyone else for, yes? Anyone else? Yeah, I'll close this item and take a motion.
Make a motion for the board to create subsection 17.3610, 3C, 3C, 7, 8, and 9 of the village zoning code concerning new wireless communications facilities requirements as outlined by Sarah earlier.
Second motion.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to mention that I had heard from that, but just for reasons other than mentioned earlier, but also just the fact that with the previous ordinance, we didn't really have much power at all as a village to decide where things go, and I feel like we should have more control. And I think this tool gave us that versus previously the state, and that gave away all of each individual municipality rights. So I think that's a big positive to me is we decided to do a dollar something here or allow them. We have more control over where it goes and less impact on.
Anyone else? All right, with that, second roll call for.
Trustee Alice.
Aye.
Trustee Zero.
Aye.
Trustee McFall.
Aye.
Trustee Sal.
Aye.
Trustee Heather.
Aye.
President Birmingham.
Aye.
Trustee Burns.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to BHU 2062. Special building permit, requesting the garage and house addition at 5728 Full Lane. We'll open the public hearing for this. I'll take comments from the public or against this project. Anyone here to discuss it? None, we will close the public hearing and we'll take a roll call for.
I make a motion to the village board to move to approve the special use building permit application by D&D General Contractors for Mary Pfeiffer to construct an addition to the home garage demo and rebuild the garage 5728 Clover Lane with the conditions stated in the draft report and the recommendations of August 10th, 2020.
Okay, just to explain a little bit, this is a fairly standard addition, takedown addition to a Greenville original and the garage and stuff. There is a few little minor altercations that were changes from the guidelines that was put forth, but our planning consultant felt that it was very much in line with the purpose and the look of the Greenville original, so he felt it was okay to go ahead with it. Okay, so you'll notice that there is a slight addition or slightly larger garage to the site as well as as part of the building. They do need to come in with a couple of things like the brook the material, what they're adding onto the coloring of the garage and so on and so forth. Staff will be taking care of that. So if we have a motion to, include, those items, that the plant consultant has advised, you should really, it should be a good addition.
All right, we have, any comments on, the board members? Roll call.
You want me to?
Did you add, to make sure that you put that in?
I'd like to make a motion to my amendment that to include what trustee Chadwick indicated, second and third.
Take roll call, please.
Trustee Ferrazzi?
Aye.
Trustee Paul?
Aye.
Trustee Sal?
Aye.
Trustee Taylor?
Aye.
President Senior?
Aye.
Trustee Irving?
Aye.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
DOT, 2063, amend special use for the transition from patio at 6601, PC 20-83, 20-84. Now we want to get back on this, please.
By the mention of recommends and I shall move to approve and amend it to an existing special use permit for Dwelling Enterprises for the removal of the driveway, for the driveway, and for the construction of a rear patio dining area at 6601 North Place,
Second.
and to include with the stipulation about, that legal counsel has to review the uses for the area, for the doors and everything for the, dumpster that they are putting in, and to include the, recommendations of the planning consultant.
And before we ask you to vote, I will ask again, open a public hearing. Anyone wishing to come forward and talk for or against this project, please come forward. For or against this project? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and take a roll call for approval.
Could I just say something? Just to make, so everybody is aware, the front patio that he has that is facing northward is staged, that does not change. Okay, the drive-through, if you remember, was in the back, and it was coming around, we knew there was gonna be a difficulty with the car, especially a large car, or van, or anything to get through. He has since changed it, and this is where you now see a back patio. The drawing that they have submitted changed a little bit, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong on this one, there is a slight change in where the dumpster was versus where the electricity or We Energies was coming. We Energies has, dealt with this, they are not changing, but they are going to be changing as soon as the legal part of the discussion. And that's where that came in, and that's why that's a part of the, motion. Okay, we just not wanna make sure, because that dumpster has to be, has to open up a certain way, and the way it was presented was different than, what they, brought in a new drawing, which not everybody was able to get that night. Okay, Jim, is that about right?
Yeah, they just reversed the position.
Yeah.
The doors were still gonna open over into the parking lot, and, Todd and I have both looked at the downtown area, and the whole downtown area has the right to use that, just like all of the other restaurants, the dumpsters are pulled out into the street and fixed up, so. We didn't send it to the attorney yet, but we're looking through the.
And what you're talking about is just
development
coming on
agreement, so.
the parking, yeah, instead, and originally what we had been doing was going right to the parking lot. So that's part of the change. Okay.
Thank you, sir. With that, we'll take a roll call for approval.
Trustee Paul?
Aye.
Trustee Sal?
Aye.
Taylor?
Aye.
President Senior?
Aye.
Trustee Irving?
Affirmative.
Trustee Allen?
Aye.
Trustee Taylor?
Aye.
Very good, thank you very much. And, that moves on to citizen comments. People listening to make comments at the board, or enter comments one time, and 2 minutes. 3 minutes by itself, 5 if you have been. Anyone wishing to come up, name and address for the record, come on. Her name is Jerry Siegel, 5856 Ramona.
lived in Greendale since the late sixties, consider myself fairly long to the prison. Comments are on traffic in Greendale. Turn signals at Unison Grange being upgraded, so left turns do not wait for a complete cycle. You missed the left turn error. New signals have been up for almost 2 months, but are still covered, so they're not operating. Why is it taking so long? Intersection is in Greenville, even though Highway 36 is a state highway. I spoke to Nick at the Public Works Department 2 weeks ago, and he was absolutely no help. Said I had to talk to the village or talk to the state. Why couldn't he check out? I then talked to Sarah, assistant village manager, and she took my name and number and said she would check on it. I heard back from her this morning. She said the project is done, state had to do testing and swap out the full lines. 2 months this. Second comment is on traffic on West Grange. West Grange intersects with 60th and 76th Street, both of which are traffic signals. Almost all cars going west turn right at both of those intersections, especially 60th where they turn right to get on the freeway. There's no right turn lane. First guy in line goes straight. 7 or 8 cars are backed up behind me. This happens time and time again. Almost all the cars turn right. I think Greendale could probably solve it by just narrowing the lanes, make a pretty wide straight, creating a right turn lane without doing construction and maybe just doing some extent. I think on 76 it might not be as practical, but I think thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Anyone else, first time for comment? Good evening. My name is, Kendall Grace. I think most of you guys know me. I'm 5300, Greendale, Olivia Lane. I'm the, president and founder of the Voice. And I'm here, for, a couple of different reasons. For one, I want to thank all of you guys for doing great work, for diversity, for the Voice, and for the entire community. You guys have really done a great job. I know that Jason does a really good job. We heard about him speaking about the events, sometimes before. We also heard him talk about the health issues, before. Donna, helped us, Trustee Olmec helped us with, making history, which was great, for diversity. We really appreciate that. My group has, several hundred members, and we really appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. We certainly appreciate, Mr. Barber and Trustee Barber for all the work that he's done, to help us out, on a one-on-one basis. There are a lot of times when we take phone calls and things from us that really helps us just to move along. We look at, Trustee, Chadwick as well. We like your passion. It's really great when you push things through. You just really, really push, and we like that, we think that is great for our organization. Again, we're several hundred, deep, right now, all nationalities. We're for everyone. Also, Trustee, McFall, we know that you're new. You're fairly new on the scene. You're from the Public Works, and we know that you're going to bring a whole lot of things to the table that haven't already been brought to the table. We're looking forward to that. At the same time, Trustee Sell, I really appreciate you personally because a lot of times I've spoken before this week before, and you've taken my paperwork and things like that when I would make a speech, whatever, give it to you, and you would take that in. And I would share that with our organization, with our group, and we just think that that's very sincere of you to do that, and I, for one, personally appreciate all that you do. Also, with Mr. Michael, he's not here today to see that. He tells us with flags, and what we're trying to do is bring flags to the community of all nationalities. We represent everyone, and we think everyone's doing a good job. But there is some bad stuff as well. Some of the bad stuff that I just kind of want to push to the end is the fact that folks are wanting to hear from you, Mr. Irvin. They want to know the state of Greendale. What is the state of Greendale? How are we with masks? How are we with schools reopening? What's happening in Greendale? Are we in a good situation? Are we in a bad situation? People want to hear directly from you. And at the same time, we know that all the other trustees have lost support as well. So you guys, at the same time, we're looking for you guys to speak up with just what is the state of Greendale? Where are we at with masks? Where are we at with this? Where are we at with that? There was a couple of my members that were actually in your coffee shop when they were there, and they were kind of upset because they didn't wear masks. They were upset with that, and they just brought it to our attention. I thought that we would bring it to you because you
one nationality, work for everybody. And again, my organization comes together strong, and we seem to be stronger with you guys help. And that's all enough of that. Really want to bring it to you guys because they want to know what is the state of Greenville. Should we be wearing masks? Are we getting more tests? And should schools be open? Should they not be open? What's happening for every single resident? As it stands right now, there's about 500 students who are online. The rest are all doing it in person after school. That state. We don't know that. At this time, there's 2,700 students in the district as a whole. So where are we at with that? Should everybody wants not report? There's about 14,072 residents in Greenville as a whole. So just where we at? People are wanting to know. If you guys ever forget any of the questions, whatever, feel free to visit the voice and other voices. Don't have all of these listed what we spoke about. And again, you guys have already made history electing or nominating the first African American woman to together made history with the Festival of Barbecue and Food, what we're doing there. And then at the same time, what we're trying to do with the flags and representing everyone. So as far as diversity goes, you guys get an A grade. You guys are doing great. We really appreciate you for taking what you want and listening to me when I would come before the village and speak before you guys and speak to me. That's why this time I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't preach or anything else. I just wanted you guys to know that we are watching each and every one of you guys do what you do. And what you do matters. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Jim,
Yes.
Wallace Bendy, 6123 Valley. Question, what is this about flags in regards to?
we really can't talk on it.
Oh, you can't? Okay,
Citizens' comments, they were in an area that you follow up to the comments. Yeah, but they have, it's just the way it is.
okay. There's only one flag in this country.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. Linda Larson, 5580 Municipal Square. I'm here to talk about a couple of issues that's been happening in Greendale. I've been here for 30 years. Greendale is definitely going in the wrong direction. I'm really disappointed at this board. The first thing I want to talk about is Black Lives Matter. They are a Marxist hateful group. They do not belong in our society. They promote Marxism, and they are looking to destroy the average American family, and that is true. They do not belong in front of our village hall writing graffiti. You can call it art shop, but that's not what it is. They've got this, they've got the BLM, which is bad for America. My second point is about our American flag. There is only one flag in this country. You fought for it, right? And you know what it means. So don't sit here and put up. Who funded the Voice Incorporated? Who funded that? He asked for $5,000. Who funded that? Is the village? If you go on and look at that group, they are a hateful group. And I'm going to tell you about what our flag means in this country. Number one, we stand for the flag today, not to please ourselves, but to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Number two, we stand for the flag not to focus on what divides us, but what unites us, which is being an American. Number three, we stand for the flag not to pledge allegiance to a president, but to honor the reality that we have elected our president and not a lifetime king. And I hope that this election is fair with integrity, because we all know it's under assault right now. Don't kid yourself. Number four, we stand not because of past or present pain caused by injustice, but to salute the principle of justice. And number five, we stand for the flag, not for our generation, but to set an example
generation, if we do not advocate a love of our country to our children and our generation to come, then why would we have our children go out to fight for their country? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I gotta say something.
Of course.
The third building stand for the flag, and he wants more flags. You guys are a bunch of hypocrites, losers. You sit here and you worry about a tower, and you're all covered with masks. God damn, Jesus. This country was shit. These turds elected my flag is either to go upside down or I'm burned. And I fought for this country. I bet you he did.
Thank you. Anyone else, for 2020 year? That, I will move on to the next, standing committee, finance committee, trustee Bowden.
Thank you, President, for anyone who has one item. For tonight, presentation discussion of the 2019 financial statements and external audit results, FC 2020. Chris, say for this?
Then your packet is a summary of what it's.
Okay.
Ryan, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Perfect, yeah.
Okay. If anybody, first off, thanks for having me, and certainly thanks for allowing me to do this over the phone. Certainly appreciate that. I do want to thank Kristen for the cooperation we received throughout the audit process. And as I do go through the discussion here, if anyone is not following along or wants me to pause and kind of redirect you with the documents and where I'm at, please feel free to ask. Obviously, I can't see, so again, just want to make sure everyone gets their questions answered, and hopefully this is informative for you. Okay, that being said, as part of the audit process, that you should have two documents, the annual financial report. That does include our independent auditor's opinion. That means that the document is complete, accurate, and in accordance with our professional standards, so that's exactly what you should hope or expect to see. If you haven't had a chance to, I would suggest that you read through that management discussion and analysis section of that document. That just provides a nice narrative overview of the financial report. So that's a nice document to read. And then the other item that I do want to walk you through is the management communication letter. That's a stapled document. It's about a 20-page letter. I'm going to kind of walk through that, and I'm going to reference a few pages. So if everyone could just grab that document and have that in front of them, I'd appreciate it. Is everyone ready for me to continue there? Okay, I'm just going to keep moving along here then. So that's the letter. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Is he on mute?
Go ahead.
Are we on mute? We were on mute. You can't hear us.
Can you hear us now?
No, I think we're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yep, yeah, I can. Okay, I will continue then, sorry. We had a little interruption there. Okay, so I'm just referring to that letter, and it's I'm going to walk through the document. It's labeled as the Executive Audit Summary and the Board Communications. If you flip to the table of contents, I just have a few comments about some of the documents or portions of the document. The first section is labeled as the formal required communications. That is very standard. The language and the content of what's disclosed there is information that we're required to communicate as part of the audit process. I would say it's certainly very standardized, nothing unusual from my perspective. If there are any topics there that catch your interest or anything that you would like me to explain further, I would be more than happy to. I'd say just let me know which topic. A real brief overview. I mean, it talks about things like accounting policies, accounting estimates, financial statement disclosures. You know, again, nothing that is unusual, certainly nothing that's a red flag. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments on that formal required communication document? That's pages 2 through 5. Okay, if none, then I'm just going to keep moving along. And then it moves into the internal control communication, and that starts on page 6. And if you look at the bottom of page 6, there's a reference to a significant deficiency and then a bullet point that references preparation of the financial report. That is a comment that you have seen in the past. It's extremely common for an organization your size. It really is being disclosed because as part of the audit process, we as your auditors also prepare that financial statement. So again, extremely common. I just wanted to point that out. Again, you've seen that in the past. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to the financial information. That starts on page 8. And is everyone with me? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to keep going then. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, page 8, that just gives you a snapshot of your fund balances at the end of 19 in comparison to the end of 2018. So it starts out with your general fund at the top section of that. And you'll see the set of underlines and subtotals there. The total for the general fund. At the end of 2019, your general fund was $4,332,000, which is a decrease of $297,000 or almost $300,000 from the previous year, from 2018. That was certainly a budgeted, planned use. You actually budgeted use of approximately $395,000. And you use $297,000. So from a budget perspective, positive in that you didn't use as much as you had budgeted or planned. And I'll talk a little bit more about your general fund when we move on to the next page. There's another chart at the top of that page. So I'll be talking more about the general fund as we move forward. And then the rest of this page, page 8, it just presents the rest of your funds, the special revenue funds in the middle of the page. You can see the fluctuation in the recycling fund. Because it's in brackets means you were in a deficit. So at the end of 2018, recycling was in a deficit of just under $131,000. That did improve, and the size of the reduction reduced, the deficit reduced to $62,780. And you also see things like the donation fund, a little bit of fluctuation in that. Moving on to the bottom section there, that moves into the capital projects funds. So you can see your equipment replacement fund, $240,950. Your capital improvement fund, that is in a deficit position at the end of 2019, a deficit of $106. And then it moves into your tax incremental districts, and that's just giving you your fund balance reserves as of the end of the year. I will be walking through each of the tax incremental districts individually as well, so I'm not going to get into those more now. But that just gives you a snapshot of what your balances are at the end of the year. If you move on to page 9, the chart at the top of page 9, that gives you information on your general fund. And I always like to look at what your trends are. When I see that chart at the top of page 9, really just shows a lot of overall consistency in your fund balance. Certainly, I think that's a positive. If you go back and it's showing 5 years there, back in 2015, your total general fund balance was approximately $4.6 million. You can see that carry over being extremely flat or consistent through 2018. And then for 2019, you see a real slight dip there for that use of fund balance. Again, that was planned. When we look at the individual categories, I really like to focus on that unassigned category. The unassigned balance at the end of 2015 was $3.4 million. You can see the balances fluctuate slightly as you move across that graph to $3.3 million at the end of 2018 and $3,145,120 at the end of 2019. From a benchmarking perspective, we always like to compare how much fund balance you have in comparison to the amount of expenditures flowing through your budget. In terms of your total fund balance represents about 36% of your expenditures. Your unassigned fund balance represents about 26% of your expenditures for the year. Both of those numbers from a benchmarking perspective, certainly very strong reserves. The general benchmark typically is 20 to 25%, and obviously you're slightly above that at 26. So from a benchmark fund balance perspective, again, you continue to be in real strong shape. Does anyone have any questions there? Maybe I'll just pause there. Okay, if none, I'll just keep moving on. I just want to make sure you're able to follow along and answer any questions you have. At the bottom of page 9, we move on to the water utility. So here, this is just giving you a snapshot of your revenues and expenses for the year. So you can see your revenues fairly consistent at just over $2 million. The expenses, the operation and maintenance expenses did increase slightly, as well as your depreciation expense increasing slightly. And as a result, that operating income, that's looking at revenues less expenses, it did come in at $312,000, but it is a little bit less than the previous year. And then we've also got non-operating expenses for things like interest on your long-term debt. And then we also have the transfer out. The transfer out is a payment from your water utility to your general fund, so you're required to make that. And it leaves you with a change in net position, again in brackets, so it's a deficit of $154,608. So that's just giving you a snapshot of your revenues and expenses. At the top of page 10, there's another chart, and again, just trying to give you some perspective from a benchmarking perspective. One of the things that the Public Service Commission monitors and benchmarks is what they call their rate of return, and they're looking at the dollar amount that you have invested in your capital assets in your infrastructure, and they compare that to the amount of operating income that you have. And they do have a subtle tweak to that formula, but that's essentially what they're looking at. You can see from an authorized rate of return based on the Public Service Commission is 4.75%. You can see your actual has decreased a little bit, both in 2018, 2019. Obviously, that's why we've been talking about water rate application and raising water rates and et cetera. So I realize this is looking backwards a little bit, looking at 2019, but just wanted to kind of walk you through that. And again, that rate tariff, I believe, is effective for 2020. So, and then if we move on to page 10, bottom of page 10, just focusing on the sewer utility. Here too, giving you a comparison between years. Operating revenues did increase slightly over 2018. Expenses also did increase slightly, leaving you with operating income or revenues in excess of your expenditures of $103,000. And then you've also got a transfer out, leaving you with a change in net position of a positive $87,749. And then if we move on to page 11, just gives you a snapshot of your stormwater. So stormwater, you can see the revenue is extremely consistent, $610,000 for both 2019 and 2018. Expenditures did increase slightly, up to $495,000 in total, and leaving you with operating income of $113,946. And certainly when you step back and think about your utilities and their rate structure and financial performance, water is a little bit different because it's regulated by the Public Service Commission and they set your rates. With, sewer and storm, I always think it's important to step back and think about your cash flow. What do you have in terms of capital needs? What's coming up in the pipeline looking out a few years? And just making sure that you've got a plan for how you're going to be able to finance any capital additions and things that you do need to get done to maintain the system. So certainly there's some balance with regards to that, just making sure that the system is operating efficiently, effectively, and also, controlling the rate structure as residents are concerned with that. Any thoughts or comments on any of the utilities?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
On page 9, by the operating income, I'm not clear on why our operating income went down from 2018 to 2019, that substantial amount. Can you explain that?
For the water utility? So
yeah.
From a operating income perspective, your revenues were down just slightly, but your expenses were a little bit higher, both your operation and maintenance expenses as well as your depreciation. And I mean, depreciation is really just an accounting function, to be honest with you. We are depreciating assets consistent with the Public Service Commission guidance. But because of the increase in your expenses and those revenues coming down just a little bit, that's really why you see that decrease in your operating income.
So that's not like where the fee income comes where we charge the people for the water bills?
No.
That's not,
actually, and
okay.
I-
Yeah.
So that, on the charges for service line, we have,
Where is it? Oh, okay.
we found this with the rate, now, the customer that had changed the way they do things. So that's a lot, for the result of the increase there, the change where they were doing their process, so not using as much cost. And then as far as depreciation, going up, that's because we invested in now projects in the downtown, and now that's started getting depreciated. So one thing to remember, especially with that horrible rate of return, on the each
I know.
is that we chose to implement the rate. Remember that we would have to implement, we wanted it to be that it was for January, February, March.
Right.
And the full thing, everybody gets that, fire. So that's why I think it pretty much fell off, but we really needed that income as the, was going, so we're ready, for the fiscal year, I think, however,
So 2020 should be a lot better.
I think we'll.
Right, okay.
The 2010,
Yeah, it's so much more.
yeah.
Right, okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, great question. Sounds like you got that answered, so I'll just continue on. Again, if you want me to come back to anything, just let me know. If we jump ahead to page 12, we start getting into the tax incremental districts. In the top of page 12, there's a little small chart that lists each of the districts. There's a column for costs to be recovered, and I'll walk through each one of those individually. And then also list the statutory termination date. So when I step back and look at those, I'd say just keep in mind that some of those termination dates are out there quite a few years. When you start looking at, 2043, 2045, certainly you've got a lot of life to recover those costs. So, and then I'd say also keep in mind that from a TID perspective, usually you're incurring upfront costs, and that you're designed to try to recover those costs over the statutory life of the tax incremental district. So that being said, I'm going to jump into page 12. At the bottom of that page walks through tax incremental district number 1. And if you look at the format of this, and all these formats are going to be consistent, it starts out looking at project costs, your project revenues, and then we've got the columns for 2019, so that's just your activity, your revenues and your expenses for 19, and then that column labeled from creation, from date of creation, that's basically looking at the entire life of that specific tax incremental district, and just trying to give you a little bit more history or perspective on kind of how you got to where you're at. Okay, so if you look at TID 1, and I'm going to focus on that 2019 column first, it starts out looking at your expenses, so expenses of $106,000 for 2019, and then your revenues, including your tax incremental revenue and interest income, total revenues of $279,834. So your revenues exceeded your expenses by $173,000 for 2019. If you jump over to the from date of creation column, your costs over the life of that TID are $2.7 million, and the amount of revenues that you've received is only 1.9. So you've really got at this point in the life of the TID, you've got $776,000 of costs to recover. Okay, and then if you move on to the bottom portion of that table, it just walks you through how how you financed that. Essentially, you have debt that's outstanding, $1,680,000 in terms of outstanding debt. You do have fund balance available, so you have $903,000 of fund balance, and again, that gets you to the same ending answer, which is net cost to be recovered of $776,000. Now, I always feel like from an audit perspective, we're trying to report your actual results, but I also feel like that perspective tends to be a little bit historical and looking backwards. What I think you've got to remember is, what's the age of the TID? What do you expect to happen in the TID during the rest of its life? Meaning, do you expect significant changes in tax base, equalized value, or things that are going to drive your tax increment revenue as you move forward? And are there also additional project costs that need to be incurred? And as you think about that, that's really where I guess I'd say the rubber hits the road in terms of understanding where the TID expects to end up, right? When I step back and look at where you're at for this one at the end of 2019, I again, not knowing everything that you expect to happen going forward, but you've got costs to recover of $776, and your tax increment revenue for 2019 was $250. So obviously, if that continues, it looks like you should be in pretty good shape. And I think that's kind of the common theme as I work through the rest of these TIDs as well. Does that make sense? Does that format and discussion make sense? Okay. Any other thoughts on TID 1? Okay, then I'm going to jump ahead to TID 2. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to predict or project how these are going to ultimately end up. I'm just trying to give you some historical perspective. Okay, for TID 2 on page 13, again, same format, walks you through your cost, your project cost for 2019, $384,000. Your project revenues, including your tax increment revenue of 1.6, interest income of 92,000, leaving you with your total project revenues, 1,722,000, or your revenues exceeding your expenses by 1,338,000 for 2019. And again, looking at the from date of creation column, total project cost of $17.8 million versus project revenues to date of $11.9 million, leaving you with net cost to be recovered of $5,879,000. So, again, I always try to look at that relationship. $5,879,000, certainly a big number, but with the amount of increment that's generated there, $1.6 million coming in, that's certainly a sizable amount. And then the bottom portion of that table just kind of again walks you through your debt. You do have, $8.4 million of outstanding principal for that particular TID, but you've also got fund balance of $2,535,000. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, then I'm just going to move ahead to TID 3 on page 14. And you can read the narrative here. I mean, the narrative at the top was created in 2011. Your total project costs, $69,605 versus revenues of $313,937, leaving you with revenues in excess of your costs of $244,000. And if you move over to the from date of creation column, project costs of $2,591,000, project revenues of $2,424,000, leaving you with costs in excess of your revenues of only $167,000 as of December 31st, 2019. Again, that's your cumulative life to date results. You do have debt outstanding. That's $1,265,000. That's in the section at the bottom, less your fund balance that's available, $1,097,000. Again, leaving you with that net liability or the costs that you're ultimately trying to recover of $167,000. Okay, then moving on to page 15. Page 15, again, is just looking at TID number 4. Now, again, when you get into TID 4 and 5, just remember that because of the age, the statutory termination dates are out quite a ways. For TID 4, the statutory termination date is in 2043. Your costs to date, for 2019, 137,000 versus your revenues for 2019 of 559. That does include your tax increment revenue, 548,000, and your revenues in excess of your expenses of 421,728. That's for 2019. If I look at from the date of creation, your total project costs, $3,366,000 versus revenues of $696,000. Again, that just shows you the age of the TID and the fact that you've got to invest upfront and the timing that it takes to actually generate tax increment. Leaving you with your net cost to be recovered of $2,669,000. In the section at the bottom there, you'll see the future maturities of principal on the outstanding debt, $2,860,000, less your fund balance that's available of $190,000, leaving you with that net liability of $2,669,000. So again, very, very early in the life of that TID. And then page 16 gives you some information with regards to TID 5. Here you can see the project costs for the year of $1,084,000. From a revenue perspective, no revenues coming in. You haven't generated any tax increment revenue for 2019. And then from the date of creation, you've spent $2.2 million. You did have a premium on the long-term debt back in last year, so leaving you with a net of $2,257,000. And then if you get to the bottom section there, you'll see the outstanding debt, $2,135,000. And really that's walking you through how did you finance the expenditures, right? You've got $2,135,000 of outstanding debt, and your fund balance there is actually in a deficit position. That's why it's being added, leaving you with a net of $2,257,000. So again, very early in the life of that TID, extends out to 2045, and you really haven't even generated any increment there yet. Any thoughts or questions on those? I know I went through those pretty quickly.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's probably stupid, or it's in the statute somewhere where you can't do this, but where we've got a large fund balance, is there a reason you don't apply it to the long-term debt to reduce your interest carry costs?
So certainly, Todd or Kristen, if you want to jump in, from a debt perspective, when you issue general obligation debt, you have structured terms in terms of the timing of the payments, the scheduled principal and interest maturities. Certainly as you go through that process, so you're following the terms of the debt as they were taken out. Now, certainly over time, there's things you could look at like refinancing opportunities in order to make a principal. It's a little bit different than your mortgage. Like if you have a mortgage on your house, for example, the terms of the mortgage on your house would allow you to make a payment whenever you had cash. If you wanted to walk into the bank, you could say, I want to make an extra payment and go ahead and do that. When you get into general obligation debt that's sold on the open market, you've got to follow the terms of the debt. And there's sometimes terms in there that they'll refer to as like a call date, for example, and just really doesn't allow for prepayment. That's really kind of brings you back to looking at what kind of refinancing options you have. But, there's obviously costs to do that too. So there's always a break-even point when looking at that. So you're just following the terms of the debt that you have. Okay, then I'd say the rest of this document, very standard. Appendix B, we've got some information with regards to, I just put one of the technical standards. That's the new standard that's coming up and we'll have to deal with. That's GASB 84, deals with fiduciary activities. I'll be working with Kristen to make sure that standard, there's also some additional ones that also will be applicable in the next few years. We'll make sure that we share information and that we work towards properly implementing those. And then Appendix C, you can see that is on village letterhead addressed to Clifton Larson Allen. It's our standard practice. I know you've seen this in the past, but we include that standard audit representation letter attached to the back of this document. And the purpose of that is simply to disclose the fact that as part of the audit process, we've received all of the financial information that we've requested as a part of the audit process. So standard process for that. And maybe I'll just circle back. Just to give you a little perspective with COVID, I guess, COVID has certainly complicated our business, how we serve clients, the audit process. I mean, essentially what happened in mid-March from our perspective is we started shifting to basically 100% remote environment. So that certainly was a little bit of a learning curve, those first few audits. Now I think we're in a much better position with being able to do that. I will say from an audit perspective, I think that probably did create some additional questions, maybe a little bit more going back and forth with Kristen. So, it's just something we were dealing with given the COVID-19 situation, but certainly want to thank Kristen for her help and cooperation and assistance throughout the process. And I can assure you that we did, in fact, receive everything that we've requested. And, again, that process went well from our perspective, but just kind of, working through that. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions or thoughts or wants me to talk a little bit more about COVID.
I have one more question.
Yep.
In the report, it mentioned pension liability of $2.3 million, and when you include the retiree health benefit, it's $7.7 million. What time period is that over? Does that make sense? Like, however many years, how long does that liability run for?
So I just want to step back here. So you've got So when you're looking at, and just so that everybody's on the same page, I'm looking at page 13 in the financial statements, and there's a line for long-term obligations that lists the net pension liability, which is the $2.3 million that you referred to. This is where sometimes the accounting standards, I think, have complicated things a bit. So if you think of your budget, and what that relates to is the Wisconsin retirement system, by the way. So the Wisconsin retirement system, they have an independent actuary come and value the pension system. Are they overfunded, underfunded? If you can relate, or if you've heard of other states, there's, you go to Illinois, for example, or several other states, their pension systems are, severely underfunded. With regards to the Wisconsin retirement system, the good news is that it's fluctuated. It's basically fluctuated each of the last several years to being slightly overfunded to slightly underfunded. So as a pension system as a whole. So then what happens is they allocate that out based on your participation in the system. So because they were slightly underfunded with that most recent actuarial study, you're required to report a net pension liability. Now, there's no specific due date. The way you make payments is the way you've always made payments, which is as you have payroll and you have employees that are eligible to participate in the system establishes the contribution rates and the contribution percentages. So that hasn't changed. You just need to continue to budget and do what you've always done. And what the system does is I would say, make subtle adjustments to the contribution rates. They'll go up slightly or down slightly. So again, you just need to factor those in as a part of your budget process. There's no, at this point in time, no additional check or disbursement that you have to cut in order to make that payment. I just want to give you some perspective on this. So there's another table in your financial statements. So for the most recent actuarial study, the Wisconsin retirement system was 96% funded. If I go back to the year before, it was 103% funded, meaning slightly overfunded. So at that point in time, you reported a net pension asset. Well, you really couldn't spend that asset, right? The year before that, it was 99% funded. So I think what's going to happen is if, and you also have to remember that it's a year behind. So when we do next year's audit, we're going to be talking about 2019's actuarial study. I would bet that for 2019, because of the market and the rate of return for 2019 was pretty strong, it's probably going to be slightly overfunded for 2019. Now, if you think of what happened in 20 with the market in 20, you're probably going to be back to liability in 2020. So I guess my point with that is you've got to understand that it's a large estimate. It's handled at the system level. There is actuaries involved. And from a budget perspective, you really just need to keep doing what you've always been doing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions?
Anybody have a question? Thank you for all you've done on this important, system.
I just wanted to say thank you, Brian, and then I can ask things after you go. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if any other questions do come up, obviously Kristen knows how to get a hold of me, so just route them through Kristen and I can certainly circle back and answer any other questions that may come up at a later date.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else questions tonight for?
I know this has gone long, but I did want to add a couple of things if you don't mind. So one of the things was, we are really looking at particularly, it's free, that looks like it's really in, a doable scenario where we would think about closing it. I've been playing phone tag with our financial advisors. Their role would be to, show us scenarios and how that would all work timing wise and to, come up with, there's like certain processes that you go through in closing, one of the six. Trustee Sum had asked about why would we not pay off our debt, and Brian had explained the, how we still payment plan payments, how we have to do it, but we are in a position also, that we have, our financial advisor, Ellers, to look into the 2011 debts are callable now, or coming callable, expenses coming up, and so she's preparing some things for us to look at to see if that's something that we could do that. So then you can take the chunk and then, you know, have it be over a lesser amount of time, but only once they say that we could call that debt. 4 and 5, right, you saw, you know, those are 2 new ones, I think, we're here with the Sears redevelopment and, just the Kenny and, apartment, JTV, development for those 2. The number 1, I thought, maybe somebody commented to me that it would be helpful if we would refer to them as what they are, but we think that number 1 is Berkshire, number 2 at the mall, number 3, with Boston Store, 4 the JCPenney, and now with the apartment. Yep. So, definitely we'll be coming back to you with more stuff, but that's why we asked Brian to talk a little bit more about it. He does the historical, but kind of this is where we're at. Now with Ellers, I believe that Manager Michaels is thinking of having, something that we can prepare for you so that we can talk about going forward and in the future and.
Very good.
Go from there.
Good question.
Thank you.
So the 2 apartments behind Indicator, those have bids on?
They're part of it, so they're within it.
They're all in there.
Got it, okay.
Thank you very much.
It's just saying those, it was that, and then the apartments got added to incorporate into it, like I think it's, yeah. Yeah. So there's all kinds of different, Manager Michaels will speak to you about all of the kind of the exciting things and the financial advisors as well.
But they're doing well, so that's really positive.
So that's one amazing, thing, one thing that has been a blessing for us is the guarantee values that our development attorney has gotten for us in the, so we're always getting our increments.
Right, I didn't know the thing is 90%. Yeah, that's, we keep talking when it's not, just looking at.
It's not right, it's time to start talking about.
Yeah.
How
it goes again, what's number 1?
Berkshire. So when that part, yes, when that,
Berkshire.
Okay. Number 2 is the mall.
3 is
Boston Store.
3 is the Boston Store, 4 is the JCPenney, and then the new apartment, and then,
5 is
Sears
Sears.
redevelopment.
So in reality,
Teaching.
so I was on this for 4 years ago, either looking at this, that comes very quickly, now that's right.
Thank you very much.
All right, with that, we'll move along, and, planning commission, I think we went to all the, but, did you want to make a motion? Oh, yeah. Let's,
I'll move to the board to accept the 2019 financial statements prepared by the village auditors who do the end of the year.
Second motion?
any further discussion? None?
Trustee South,
Aye.
trustee Kevin,
Aye.
trustee Birmingham,
Aye.
trustee Bernier,
Aye.
trustee Black,
Aye.
trustee Zebrowski,
Aye.
trustee
Aye.
Very good. Planning commission, I think we need. Last, we're on library board, trustee South, anything?
We need tomorrow.
Very good. Public works committee?
None.
Board of Health?
Yes, had a meeting today. All right, Greendale is at 198 confirmed cases, since the beginning. This number has gone up a little bit in the last day or two, but, 23 individuals remain in isolation. They are at home. One good thing is we don't have anybody in the hospital right now. There's still at 3 deaths, which has been over a month, so there hasn't been any deaths. So I thought that was really good to hear also. Dr. Rossini called in today, and same thing from a month ago when he called in, same comments. He kind of feels that the virus isn't as strong as what it when it first hit. So that was really good. Some interesting information for everybody. Franklin is at 10 deaths, and Greenfield is 25. So those are, our neighboring cities, which their population is also a lot higher. So there was information about a vaccine coming. They got an email today. They're working on it, so they're telling them to get ready to start coming up with plans on how they would do that. I did ask this question because I was really curious about it, because I've had actually a lot of people ask me this, is will the vaccine be forced? Will it be mandated? And Sue seemed to think that it will not be. So it'll be, you take it if you want to take it. One other thing that was on the agenda that we discussed, item number B, discussion and necessary action to declare racism as a public health crisis in the village of Greendale. There was a lot of discussion on this, and one of the members on the board came up with a great thing, which I really truly liked, was changing it to declare racism a public health crisis. So it is, but we need to take the village of Greendale out of that scenario. So that was something that was brought up by somebody. There was a lot of charts and a lot of demographic charts basically that were shown. It actually shows that we are really doing a really good job in Greendale. You got that? Okay. I mean, it really actually, Black or African Americans actually make in Greendale what the white people make in Median and Milwaukee. So I feel that we're doing a really good job with everything the school's doing, with everything we're doing. So, did you have any questions about the chart? Because they went over all that today with us.
Jason, you have a question?
Yeah.
The testing we did, did we really vote that?
Yep. Yeah, we actually talked about that the last
We
meeting.
didn't have the results positive, though.
We did. It was pretty close. So there's roughly 200 people that were from Greendale, roughly. It could be as low as 180, because the numbers kind of got mixed in with Kenosha, I believe, right? Yep. So, but it's somewhere between 180 and 200. And originally we thought 8, but it could be as many as 10.
Oh.
So that tested positive out of.
Not that they're sick leave, just they could be positive.
And we don't know that again, so they discussed on doing that again at all.
The National Guard,
in the state, so, availability. But we're hoping to, that there'll be ongoing using testing in here in the area. But they're looking for a new site, because the site, that currently being used is going back to the traditional system. So, we're looking for a new site.
Okay, thanks. Do anything you would, add at all, without, officer, nothing else?
No. I just want to let them know everything I heard about that on that Saturday, and everybody so positive. So, tired people, everybody that was involved, thank you so much. I mean, again, I heard everything positive. How it ran, how smooth it was, yeah. So, thank you.
DPW helped too.
Yeah.
Just one thing too, could you kind of explain, how that was really a good test run, because if we were to do the vaccine, that we kind of use the same idea?
Because of where you don't know exactly when the COVID vaccine was available, but because we practiced, was looked at as a diverse comparison of exercise, we looked at it as a way to learn, what needs to be improved, what we did well, what we need to change, so that if possible, we use the same process to give out COVID vaccine. So constantly. Now, it's different when you give a shot into the arm, and then COVID will likely to go for what's being developed right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for me? Is there anything on the next one?
We have not had a meeting at this time.
Park and Rec?
We had a meeting postponed, but I did get an update, and, thanks to a lot of effort by the staff, we are still offering a lot of programs in childcare. Some of the programs are being offered just on a weekly basis, just to continue with programs. And the unfortunate thing is we are projected to be in the red about $130,000 this fiscal year. Right now, what's happening is they're trying to figure out how to do programs in the schools. That most of those programs are done, obviously, and a lot of times, usually the weekends. And the weekends are the sanitization. And the school can be sanitized. So, where do they go? How can we still have programs, some kind of offering? For the residents, right now, the classes are not scheduled to begin until October 12th, in order to try to buy some time to figure this all out.
That's when school starts?
No, that's when the Park and Rec.
Oh, Park and Rec.
Any questions?
Is, Park and Rec funded by the village or by the school? It's 50/50, so it'll be a loss by both parties. Okay.
Jack takes the first one, I believe that would be the first time my understanding,
It's been, when we started the auction.
Gonna have that option again?
2014, we had the auction, in fact, that was the first year we were $7,000 short. So we thought we got the auction, good.
We need to have a big one.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And how about public celebration?
We did have a meeting, and we had a great celebration on Saturday for Village Day. And, we have the GTO show coming up this Saturday, and I'm not sure if Kristen wanted to talk about that at all, or do you want to say anything about it? The car show?
This Saturday on, April 3, the first Saturday, similar to what, right now, the food guns and during May, $44 to really,
And that's why we left the tents up, just so everyone knows if they're wondering why, so because we have this show this weekend.
Any, questions about that? Thank you. with, and again, although I could not make it,
Some people disagree, but there was a lot of people. Yeah, it's a great celebration.
So, all right. With that, we'll move on to item number 8, which is old business. And I do have committee, to, address today, two people called the residency board. And it's the board we have set up that, actually has some cases brought to us that deals with, special time and why they can visit with them. And we have a board that, unfortunately, we set the board up and then the two people who got on the board left grade out and passed to do that. So I look forward to tonight, put on two people, Jason Albers and, the little Carl Evans, who used to be on the board here. I will take,
Motion to approve the appointments as indicated by President Dunningham.
Second motion?
questions,
Good choices.
Yeah, great, Joseph.
take,
Trustee Taylor?
aye.
President Birmingham?
Aye.
Trustee Garvey?
Aye.
Trustee Olet?
Aye.
Trustee Savarski?
Aye.
Trustee McCall?
Aye.
Trustee Bell?
Aye.
Very good, EOT item number B, EOT 2058, supplementary action regarding whether the permit non-residents that are owners of rental units, the ability to use the resident with, the recycling section, cells and apartments, to continue to become completed here.
We talked last time about this, and we asked, Rod to make some recommendations. On this and also in general, on this site. As we look at other communities, we realized we were kind of, an outlier in a lot of areas.
So I put, some guidelines in front of you, just some general guidelines that we're looking at. Obviously, the last meeting, we had some comparables of, municipalities around us. You can kind of see that most of these guidelines on here are what we take. One of the things on here that we would change is the, size of the brush, just to make it more efficient for us to run through. We found when we go into the grinding process and get rid of the arteries with residents, it's sometimes really costs a lot more money to grind. Right now, we're on 2 days of grinding. It's probably going to be around $10,000 or $12,000 grinded in. If they would come in with smaller stuff, we'd be able to grind it all. The one thing that was on there, proof of residency is required. Must show a valid Wisconsin driver's license. That is actually in the ordinance. So the top of what non-resident property owners. And the village manager and I spoke about it. We felt $70 for a fee to use the facility for property owners that are non-residents would be a decent fee. It's about $58 for us a ton to get rid of the trash. $70 would help us with an administrative fee going to the village hall, showing us the receipt, and then they would be able to use the facility. The $70 obviously from non-residents, from our property owners, a majority of what they would be getting rid of would be left over from rentals. They would be able to recoup this $70 just by taking down the security deposit. The property owner would really not be out of any money. The village would obviously just be covering itself by taking the trash, and we would cover up to a ton of garbage from the residents. That's everything, $70. Otherwise, the rest of the limitations and load sizes are just comparable to what other municipalities use. You can see, we said that large loads with, basically building materials, logs, landscape timbers, that would be also, $70. For just the amount of the mud it takes off the house. The rest of it is pretty much self-explanatory, what we take right now. Another thing is the televisions. We do not charge for TVs right now. Surrounding communities, if they don't take them or they take them, we charge them. Just to give you an idea, the number of TVs we had last year was 164,489 pounds television.
Wow.
So we're a community that doesn't charge, and everybody else charges. So a lot of the TVs are coming from, hey, my son anything else, I can take it to West Dallas, take it over to the.
That's pretty much, about all of there. Wisconsin-wide for only 2 communities that still.
So now we would charge $25 per TV.
Right.
But so if they come there with the TV, then you have to say, well, you have to go to Village Hall and pay for it, or how
Well,
would
we
you do
would try to look at probably getting got these guidelines out, maybe either in the next newsletter or the following newsletter, just to give people the opportunity to read it before we actually put it in place. I think it would end up with kind of a nightmare if we said, let's go through with it, and then, like you said, everything comes down.
But I mean, they still won't know, so if someone comes to TV, then you still have to stop them and say, you have to pay, or how, you couldn't take the money on site, is what I'm saying. Yeah, so you have to still go and get a permit.
Right, so they would go to the hall just much like they purchase a garbage cart right now. Either the receipt would be sent to us, or the resident would get a receipt, they would show up with a television, thing they would be received.
But, I mean, you could just go online too, though, at your house, pay online, like, for the garbage cart.
Like we do at our.
Print it out.
Yep.
Oh, that's perfect.
You don't need to go to the
Oh,
hall.
okay.
And then
Do we
we
have-
kind
yeah,
of put
for
it
sure.
all in place before, you know.
Make sure that we'll be able to do that online. Make sure we'll be able to do it online. Right.
In your opinion, this $70 charge, to, property owners, but they don't live here, okay, is this something that's in line with the other communities in our area?
Yeah, one of the things is that Greendale's one of the few communities that actually picks up its own garbage. So a lot of the other communities that have garbage collection is contractor that picks it up. So they have some different guidelines comparative to if you don't use the garbage collection, like if you're in a multifamily unit, then there's a fee associated with using the dump like Greenfield. If you live in a multifamily, 4 families or more, then it's a $15 per day charge to use the facility, and then you have to follow their guidelines. These guidelines are very similar.
So the idea is, yeah, we can help them even, okay, but yet, hopefully they will not abuse it.
Right, this $70 would be enough to cover administrative and up to 1 ton of garbage, which a majority of residents probably have to come in, but it helps us in not having to police everything where somebody says, well, I'm just bringing a compressor. Well, then we have to set up some sort of guidelines for each piece of furniture. Now, we still offer the $25 for one item, $15 for every additional item pickup. So if a resident wasn't cleaning out a rental property, whether they're a non-renter or not, they could still have us pick it up from their residents.
Are we blurring the lines a little bit here for businesses? Because we don't do business.
Oh,
And this.
No, we don't do anything. This is just for residential. So, I mean, we pick up from the apartment complex for the $25. We pick up from any resident.
Yeah, remember, no other, you know.
Someone you read it, maybe we have a time tomorrow. People, anywhere, we have to,
I mean, any chance that we.
and our places, I'm glad we're going that will cover some of our, as he's saying, every one of ours is about $60. We need that.
Well, I think we can go backward, okay?
I totally agree, like I said, if we can recoup some of this money and put it back, you know, win-win.
But I mean, we're trying to make it clear that this is for our, you know, citizens. If you have a business and they're paying taxes, and that's where the problem comes in. Is they feel that they are owed the fact that they should have access to the dump because they pay property taxes. Even though they don't live here, they pay the taxes. And they don't see that as a business. And a business does not have that right to do that.
I think it's a good compromise that before they couldn't even use the donut, so now at least they can use it for $70. I just want to clarify and make sure that we do, change the rule that people that that rent, or if they're in an apartment, that they can come and use the dump, that they're, not just because their ID says they live at the apartment, that they will refuse them. I want them to be
That
able
would
to
have
use
to
it.
be the ordinance change, so.
We need a.
The ordinance, I can read you the ordinance change for apartments.
I didn't know if that was a change for.
So the commercial waste, any and all waste, refuse generated in business, enterprise, or any any activities associated therewith, which includes churches, public, parochial education institutions, charitable organizations, multifamily dwellings, 4 units or more per premises, or combination business residential property. So that's the definition of commercial. In section 3, commercial waste, manufacturing waste, and medical waste shall be excluded from any type of collection and or disposal as furnished by the department. So anything commercial, not.
And really, that is just about every year.
So even in
We're
the,
gonna change that. Just be aware of what you're looking at, we should look at that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess that's my biggest worry about the department, and that, you know, some of these people that don't even, well, they're even on a stage that own these departments, you use one for, as our road. But I'm just afraid that if we get the word out that we allow apartment people or residents of the apartment to use our dump, these people that own these say, you know what, we don't need a dumpster, they'll send a notice to the next friend payment saying that basically, you know what, take your garbage on the village. Take your garbage. And that's what we're, that, you gotta almost, you almost gotta curb that, you know, that, it's hard to say that because, yes, those people do live in Greenville, but it's not the people, it's the business itself.
We just need to look at that really.
Yeah, we don't wanna go down that road.
Don't you?
I think this is a great, start, I appreciate, you getting this together. This is a good program going forward. I do also want to reinforce what you said, we need to put this in the village views before we do it, and I don't know when the next one comes out, and then put an implementation date on it. And we can also keep in mind that this isn't a good idea, find out after a year or whatever, any of these things, can change. Yeah, so it's experimental first year or whatever time frame you want to see. We find out that we are getting uses or, whatever, that we can certainly track it back.
Sure.
But I appreciate all the effort the staff put in.
I don't know what that is.
The question is, we adopted this, does it require an ordinance change or?
I think it's definitely a fee resolution, they want to indicate in the ordinance that there is a permit option for those people.
Yeah, probably just for the non-residents and renters.
Yeah, to come back.
Yeah, with the fee.
So this is what he's presenting us tonight, going forward, that we'll come back with presentation and vote on that.
Okay, I was gonna suggest, if we have a report like in, anywhere from 6 months to a year on this, just to see how I go.
You've got to bring back the resolution.
Yeah, true, but once this is, if this passes and this goes into effect, could we have a report on it, just to see how it's going?
Is everybody there?
Can I make a motion to, have staff provide either a resolution or an ordinance change, whatever is more appropriate for us to, vote on this week's meeting?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call for approval, resolution presented back.
President Birmingham?
Aye.
Trustee Burton?
Aye.
Trustee Owen?
Aye.
Trustee Zebrowski?
Aye.
Trustee Paul?
Aye.
Trustee Bell?
Aye.
Trustee Taylor? Aye.
Very good. Moving to new business, thank you very much.
Yeah.
DOT 2064, preliminary 2021 budget session, 21 calendar. Everybody should have got that in their report. You want to go over it?
Yeah. Just basically the staff is gonna get approximately 2021 budget, where the department has some their needs. A couple of things that are gonna be tough to know, our health insurance is there, gonna be contract agency that budget for. We're gonna see decrease our investments, building permits, like with our COVID thing. And if you remember, we don't have the fee of $1,000 budget, to get paid here. So kind of looking for some feedback, look at, did feedback, either separately. Also, of course, is maybe the whole meeting, we had scheduled 3 days, October 26th, October 15th, and November 4th. If you could let us know that you make that
Jason, Page?
What day?
Make it October 26th, 28th, November.
We all done, we all done.
As of now, I think.
Make sure you mark it
Right.
now.
Thank you, all right, with that, we'll, DOT 2065, discussing necessary action to start special event permit. Public Foundation Committee. Okay, hold on.
Okay, the public celebration committee, requesting for previous annual meetings and Oktoberfest Beer Garden, which has been reduced to one day event, until 10 on Saturday. We'll still have some drinks and music, along with some modified fall activities in an effort to get back and simplify this event. It'll again take place at Eagle Park, and the road closure is requested on Broad Street from Corporate Court Schoolway, including the small portion of Schoolway from the south driveway from Vintage and the cover remains open, which allows for pedestrians to cross easily, without there being traffic going through there. Request for September 26th to also declare the Celebration Day, and the special event permit was reviewed at the August 11th meeting. Is for free.
What celebration day?
Public celebration.
Public.
We're gonna find that day.
Yep.
And then,
What do you mean? Yeah, so we can.
I'm fine with that.
Drink and carry.
All right. Any, I'll take down a motion for approval.
Motion to approve for the village board, special event permit for 8 days, as presented by Christian.
Second motion?
Any, further discussion? I'm gonna take a roll call for approval.
Trustee Garden,
Aye.
trustee Lett,
Aye.
trustee Strong,
Aye.
trustee Paul,
Aye.
trustee Stell,
Aye.
trustee Patrick,
Aye.
president Herman.
Aye, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody, received the officer's report tonight, any questions, when the department heads that? There's none, we'll move to the last, number 11. This is the citizen's last citizen's comment. If you next, come up front and give your name and address. Again?
Hello again, Oleg Cundy, 6123 Downing Street. I had approached you in the past in regards down at the coffee shop, in regards to installing a three-way stop sign on Devonshire and Sherwood, because a lot of the members of the village club think it's an interstate, and as the chief can attest, I do make regular calls on a weekly basis, sometimes daily, in regards to speeders. At that particular intersection, there's also a crosswalk there where a number of the students get access to high school. And I have literally seen cars slamming on their brakes, honking horns at pedestrians, people walking their dogs. A number of the people I've talked to in the T section, you can't really talk right now, have all been in favor of it. Certain people have lost their pets due to speeders along there. They ignore the stop signs, and I invite any of you to come and sit in that backyard and have a cocktail with me when they're bound down there, because it's ludicrous, and it's a matter of public safety.
Thank you. Hello again.
Bruce Lewandowski, 288 Oakland Lane. I'd like to thank these three people for being at the ready for the member flag. And it's the American flag. We know we're a melting pot of nations. And we all should stand by the flag, American flag, and not all these different nationality flags. I mean, it's almost like dividing. And that's the lady that brought up Black Lives Matter, and it's like almost people are afraid to stand against it because they're discriminatory. If you read the Black Lives Matter, it is a bad group. And that fist, that's part of that graffiti, that's a fist of violence. It's in that blue. And not a fist of whatever, it's just a violence. And, I don't know about the vision group, that group, vision?
Voice.
The voice. And, if they align themselves with Black Lives Matter, I wouldn't support them as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments?
Elaine, under 4816 Sutton Lane. I just have a comment about the July 21st, board minutes. I reviewed them because I attended that meeting. And, there were, 8 or 9 citizen comments that day, you might recall, on discussion about Dale Creek Apartments and the buffer zone and various things. And, I stood up and, said that I was opposed to a village-wide mask mandate. And this was before Governor Ebert's order. And my comments were not included in the minutes. And was it an oversight? Was it on purpose? It makes me wonder what else might be excluded from the minutes. And I think if citizens come here, our comments should be part of the public record. So, I was disappointed. I asked for a revision to the minutes and was told that's never been done before. I'm fine letting it be, but there wasn't a video of that meeting posted either. So I just want to bring that to your attention. I think citizens come here to be heard. Let our voices be heard and put our comments to the public record.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Larson, 4580 Central Square. First I want to say I was at Village Day. The band at the end of, we were only there in the evening. The band at the end of the day was very, very good. I hope if I said that. We had a good time. There was a lot of pleasant, social engagement. So I hope that they will open the schools. The children do need to get back. They're not getting infected. This started December 1st, first case. So we're 9 months into this, and we've got, less than 2% of deaths. I'd like to hear more about being healthy. D3, 1,000 IUs to 5,000. I'd like to hear 25 to 50 milligrams of zinc and vitamin C. Can we get hydrochloroquine? Is that available?
Not that I know of, if anybody's required to.
Because that's been proven to help. So that's what we need to be talking about, not a vaccine. I'm not against vaccines, but I'm not willing to wait for that to get back onto our lives. We see what's happening here. Oh, and then the other point that I wanted to make is when they were having the walk down Village, Broad Street. I live at the end of Broad Street, and after 14 years, my hot water heater went out on a Friday. They were gonna come and replace it, but we had barricades on my street. So we called the police department, and we could not let the people get in. So all weekend, we went without hot water. And Black Lives Matter has said they like it when people are, put out because they've been put out. So I want them to know we were put out for the whole weekend without hot water, and I had company that weekend. Okay, thank you. Oh, and one more thing, we did call, dispatch of Greendale to find out if they were gonna protect our house, because we didn't know what was gonna happen, but it was directed to Hills Corner, and they didn't know what was gonna happen. So then I called Village Hall, and I think I got you. You didn't announce your name, but it was a nervous laugh, and they said they didn't know either, that they only knew as much as we did. And then I watched them across the street at 2:30 pull the blinds, and they all left. So you can imagine as a resident who's law abiding, put my kids through school year, and nobody could tell me that they were gonna protect our property, okay? So I wanna make sure that is clear and on the record. Thank you.
Very good. Further comments? With, hearing none, I will, motion for adjournment, and I have one for. So moved. Any second?
Second.
Roll call for approval.
Aye.
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 Aye.